he is currently. So this is definitely going to be a dynamic matchup, and it's all about the bulk, basically. You know, for me, the big question is what Pokemon ends up Dynamaxing. I think Primarina is a great choice on Guillermo's end, and on the opposing end, I think like Corviknight and Gastrodon Pokemon that I'm looking at. Dracozolt, I think, is also really strong, but the thing that you have to worry about with Dracozolt is Amoonguss going for Rage Powders to redirect those Max Lightnings away, and I think that makes it substantially harder to justify at least leading it.
Well, maybe we'll see it in the back, but let's go ahead and get things started in this matchup between Guillermo and Antonio. I'm so excited to see how these players are going to really play with their teams and pilot them, but Antonio brings out Corviknight and Arcanine as Guillermo kicks it off with Porygon 2, and there is Amoonguss.
So Amoonguss, not really in a great spot, going up against two Pokemon that have super effective attacks against it, potentially. Now, Corviknight and Arcanine aren't exactly, you know, super offensive most of the time, so there's a chance that Amoonguss can even survive like a double up from the Corviknight and the Arcanine. So I think Amoonguss in a really tricky spot right now. Looks like it's opting to go for the Spore. I think Trick Room here is very safe because, you know, the Amoonguss just kind of outspeeds everything on Antonio's end. So that makes a lot of sense, but Amoonguss just in a really tricky spot right now. You know, going for the Spore onto Corviknight covers any switches, but it also means that if you have the Lumberry, you immediately burn it, and then you set up Trick Room and you can set up the Spore this next turn. So first question I have is, you know, can Corviknight and Arcanine actually have enough offense to knock out Amoonguss turn 1, and do they go for it? Looks like it's actually going to be a Corviknight switch out, though.
Ooh, into Gastrodon. Very interesting choice. But I think that's really good. If that Corviknight did end up having something like a Lumberry. But wait. What?
What? The South Will-O-Wisp! On turn 1! That was so smart! I can't believe what I just saw. I cannot believe what we just saw. That is so clever. And, you know, this is an open team sheet tournament, right? So both players know what moves every Pokemon has. So Antonio recognizes, hey, Amoonguss doesn't have a grass type attack that hits me for super effective damage. Let me just bring in Gastrodon, burn it. And so even if Trick Room goes up, the Gastrodon isn't just no immediate threat of damage. That was just so smart. Now what Gastrodon can do is potentially just Dynamax and go for Max Quakes. I mean, one thing you have to be maybe a little bit wary of is a Tyranitar switch in, because Max Quick could potentially activate that weakness policy, but as we've seen, Guillermo doesn't actually have that Tyranitar. So how do you actually deal with Gastrodon now?
Oh my gosh, that was just so smart. Oh, holy cow. I'm just like kind of blown away still by what just happened. But yeah, Gastrodon's gonna be a huge threat to Guillermo's team. And even though Arcanine gets put to sleep, you stop the sleep onto the Gastrodon, and that's the biggest turn. And I feel like Antonio is in the driver's seat right now.
Yeah, he absolutely is. You know, self-status is, you don't see very often, but that was the perfect example of how it could be really good. And what's actually really tricky is that the Primarina also doesn't even have Hyper Voice, right? So you can't go for water type attacks instantly Arcanine. Normally, Primarina has a pretty good matchup instantly Arcanine, but here forced instead to go for the Dynamax and Max Starfall into Gastrodon. But Gastrodon, of course, now can go for a Dynamax and start going for those Max Quicks, get those special defense boosts, and with no super effective attack against the Gastrodon, this thing is going to be so difficult to knock out. So I think Guillermo going for pretty much the only play that he can by going for the Starfall onto it, right? You can't Max Geyser there at all. You can't go for the Hydro Pump, but Gastrodon here opting to go for the pretty safe Max Quick as well. And now the question is, can you actually knock out the Gastrodon through these special defense boosts in these 3 turns Dynamax?
I think it's going to be a really difficult ask of Guillermo's team, but Antonio's Pokemon are just going to be so difficult to get through, especially with this special defense boost. You know that Primarina is a special attacker, so being able to get those special defense boosts with Max Quake ends up mitigating so much of that offensive pressure. But I want to see where this ends up kind of being targeted, as we do see Sludge Bomb come through. Arcanine does take a little bit of damage there, but here is that safe Max Quake, the clean play into the Amoonguss, and Amoonguss still hangs on.
Hangs on, yeah. It takes a lot of damage, and more importantly, the special defense boost goes off against onto that Gastrodon. So, you know, Primarina, pretty strong Pokemon. It's got that Life Orb, as we've seen as well. There's a Max Starfall, and that is not very much damage at all. Little. And also, you set up the Misty terrain now, so Amoonguss, you know, can't really Spore for the next couple of turns. So it's in a really awkward spot now where you can go for redirection, but is that really that great? I think Amoonguss probably wants to switch out the subsequent turn. You get that regenerator as well, but once again, how do you deal with Gastrodon? Like, you look at what Pokemon Guillermo brought, they're no physical attackers, right? So if Gastrodon just gets 3 Max Quake boosts off and gets a recover off as well, I think it's pretty much impossible to knock out other than maybe a critical hit Moonblast from the Primarina, or maybe just a critical hit Max Starfall right now. No surprise to see Amoonguss switch out because there's really nothing for it to do right now. I think Porygon an excellent switch in, but it's still just how do you deal with this Gastrodon right now? I just don't see an answer other than hoping for a critical hit or stalling out the Max and then getting a big Moonblast on the turn after the Max ends.
Yeah, and now these Max Quakes are going to be targeting down the Primarina, so even though it's not doing too much damage, it is chipping away at that health pool. And again, getting a special defense boost as we see, another Max Starfall come through, but look at how little damage it continues to do.
It feels like the Primarina is taking the same amount of damage from the Life Orb, honestly. And what's critical here is, it survives, another turn, has its berry as well. So, even another double up, like a tri-attack Max Starfall, I'm not sure knocks out the Gastrodon. And if Gastrodon's able to get a recover off, it's just so difficult to be able to pull this off. So I think what Antonio wants to do is position himself so that he can get a recover off, because of course, if he has recover, which, most Gastrodons carry. If he doesn't, then the Gastrodon's a little bit more, I think, bearable to deal with, because you can just go for, consistent attacks and it can't heal itself. But I think Arcanine here pivoting out doesn't surprise me very much, because you want to put on offensive pressure. Rillaboom actually the perfect switch out here, because, just does so much damage into Primarina. Primarina's max is going to end after this next turn, so I think a great pivot out there. Especially because Arcanine just provides no utility right now.
Yeah, Arcanine is unfortunately not going to be able to do too much here, as we do see this Gastrodon continue to chip away at this Primarina. But Rillaboom is going to be a big offensive threat against this Primarina, but look at how little damage still from all of these special defense boosts that are coming through. Gastrodon able to hang on, and oh my gosh, it's just so tricky.
Yeah, and what's really tough is Guillermo set up Trick Room in this game, but then it was Gastrodon attacking first under Trick Room the entire time, right? So Trick Room now ends, max ends, and this is why the Rillaboom switch-in is so brilliant, because now what you can go for is just, say, go for a Grass-type attack into the Primarina with the Rillaboom. That should just be enough to pick up a knockout. And I don't even think a Tri-Attack knocks out Gastrodon from this range. You might, maybe just try to bank for it right now and get as much damage off as possible. If it's actually a high damage roll, maybe it's enough to pick up a knockout. I'm just wary of it because of all those special defense boosts. But, if Gastrodon gets a recover off here, I think the game is essentially over. You really need to knock out Gastrodon this turn. So what's tricky here is, I don't think you expect the Primarina to survive a Grass-type attack. So given that the Porygon outspeeds Gastrodon, I think it's just hope for a Tri-Attack onto the Gastrodon to pick up the knockout. Looks like Guillermo's actually opting for the Trick Room instead, though, which could be a disaster if Gastrodon has recover and goes for it. Maybe Guillermo going for it, expecting Gastrodon not to have the recover. But let's see, it's Woodhammer coming out. That's a knockout at a Primarina. Gastrodon recovers here. I just don't see how you knock it out anymore.
Yeah, it's so low, and you really want to be able to...
Oh, there it is.
It does go for the recover. It does have it, and now what was a potential knockout range, even from that Tri-Attack, is no more. That recover going to be able to get back so much health, and now with the Trick Room back up, Gastrodon's going to be moving first again.
Yeah, I just don't see how you deal with Gastrodon, right? You needed to whittle away at it to a point where you can knock it out after the Dynamax ended, but now it's at +3 special defense. Even critical hit attacks from Guillermo's end don't knock out Gastrodon, right? You're stuck with an Amoonguss with Sludge Bomb. That can't do anything against it. You have a Porygon with Tri-Attack, but even a critical hit Tri-Attack won't pick up the knockout. So you can hit everything around the Gastrodon right now, and maybe Timer is actually a potential win condition where you have multiple Pokemon, and you just keep knocking out Gastrodon's partners, but there's just no offense anymore from Guillermo's end.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I feel like the offense kind of comes through with either Dynamaxing the Porygon 2 or getting that Primarina done, like we saw Guillermo go for. And unfortunately, now that the Primarina is gone, there's not really a good way to counter the Gastrodon that's on the field.
Exactly, and the Rillaboom critically has that knockoff as well. Obviously a very common move on Rillaboom, but so good in this matchup specifically because Guillermo's team is super, super bulky. once again, one of the main things is that Guillermo just doesn't have any physical attackers, and so Gastrodon getting to +3 special defense makes it nearly unKOable, right? You, at this point, need to go for maybe some critical hits, but even with crits, yeah, I think your game plan now from Guillermo's end is you target around the Gastrodon, and play to a situation where it's like 2v1 or 3v1 against it, and, because this game has been dragging on for a while, timer is a win condition. Of course, no reason to just forfeit yet immediately because it's timer is a win condition, plus you can get more information in terms of speeds from the opposing side. Both players have access to team sheets in terms of moves and items, but, figuring out what Pokemon's faster, I think is always valuable as well.
Absolutely. There's a lot of information to still be gleaned from playing out this match in full, and it's not over till it's over, like you mentioned. So I still think that there is a win condition on the board for Guillermo, and you're still trying to figure out exactly how your opponent is going to be playing through a lot of these crucial turns. I really like that we're gonna see a switch here from Guillermo, just the Amoonguss coming back for the Porygon 2, maybe expecting that more of these attacks are going to be coming out from this Gastrodon into that slot, as Rillaboom is also going to make a change as well, and here comes Arcanine.
I think the Arcanine switching makes a lot of sense. You want Rillaboom to maybe potentially reset terrain, reset Fake Out later on. Arcanine pretty much does nothing against, what the given Pokemon are, especially if you're expecting the Amoonguss to switch out. So, yeah, I think, once again, for Guillermo, the only way you can maybe win this is if you knock out all of Gastrodon's partners, but there's just no offense whatsoever, so even though, Antonio's not doing very much damage, there's also just no damage coming up from Guillermo's end, so I think you have to consistently double up on some, especially after Gastrodon gets that recover off, right? So, what's also really critical on Antonio's end is you basically want to keep damaging the Arcanine slot. Porygon and Amoonguss can keep healing back with Recover and Regenerator respectively, but Arcanine cannot heal back. So, if you just knock out the Arcanine, then Amoonguss no longer can heal because there's no more Regenerator, so yeah, no surprise to see an Earth Power coming off and adds so much damage!
Yeah, well, there's the critical hit that comes through, and Arcanine able to hang on and be able to consume its berry, but wow, that Earth Power was just the perfect move for Antonio to go for into that slot, as we do see the Tri-Attack come through, does a bit of damage, but Snarl now.
To make things even bulkier, I mean, this game has everything. You've got Intimidate, you've got Snarls. Arcanine finally is able to wake up. Looks like it's going to opt for that Heat Wave. Porygon is going to dodge it, but, any little bit of damage on the opposing Arcanine matters here. Critical hit kind of just accelerating the pace of this game, but once again, you can, switch Arcanine out maybe here into Amoonguss, but what's really tricky is a Heat Wave will still be able to maybe do a lot of damage into it, especially if Tri-Attack doesn't knock out the opposing Arcanine, so once again, Guillermo has to try to maintain a Pokemon advantage while knocking out all of Gastrodon's partners. Just really difficult to do so, and I think on Antonio's end, you have really safe plays of consistently going for Earth Powers into the Arcanine slot. Just click Recover every now and then to make sure that even a critical hit doesn't knock you out. Maintain your Gastrodon win condition.
Yeah, absolutely. Snarl now comes out from Antonio's side, which is going to drop the special attack of both of these Pokemon. Not going to be too big of an issue here, as we do see Gastrodon continue to click Earth Power into that Arcanine slot, and just chipping away at that damage as we see the Trick Room come back out.
Trick Room comes back out, but once again, this is why that Spore onto Gastrodon on turn 1 was just so brilliant. I mean, now the Amoonguss can, go for a Spore onto the Arcanine, or even maybe Sludge Bomb it, Sludge Bomb Tri-Attack it. Looks like Guillermo's actually content just protecting it this turn to maybe bait out another Earth Power from Gastrodon, get some more burn damage. Timer is, running slightly low now, and once again, we were talking about Timer being a win condition for Guillermo, but I don't even see how that really exists anymore, just because there's just not enough damage to keep knocking out Gastrodon's partners.
Yeah, there's so many Pokemon still left for Antonio's side, and even still, because of the defensive game that's being played, it's, I think, very difficult for any knockouts to kind of happen for in Antonio. And yeah, I'm just still kind of reeling at the fact that this game, I feel like, was just decided by the side Will-O-Wisp that we saw turn 1.
Alright, here it is. Spore onto the Arcanine this time around, but once again, there's just no damage. Earth Power is going to come out here, and once again, from Guillermo's end, there's no reason to give up. You can use this time also to come up with the game plan for the subsequent turn, and once again, there is a slight win condition in Antonio maybe messing up, taking enough damage onto the Gastrodon to the point where you can go for a get a critical hit onto it, but once again, you can also use this time to kind of plan out your game plan for the next game, right? Because this is a really tricky matchup, honestly. The Primarina isn't able to do any damage into the Arcanine because of the Gastrodon protection, but you also don't have anything to go up against for the Gastrodon specifically because there's no super effective, say, Grass type attack on the Amoonguss. So I think, like, these 4 Pokemon just weren't good enough to beat what Antonio brought, especially after that really, really smart play on turn 1. So, I think Corviknight Tyranitar absolutely has to be adjustment going into the next game. But once again, Guillermo at this point just, keep trying to get some damage off with Sludge Bumps and Tri-Attacks. But his Pokemon are now running dangerously on HP, and as soon as you knock out Arcanine, you limit the recovery from the Amoonguss as well. And with Porygon not having the Eviolite as well, there's just so little ways to really heal yourself now and be able to tank attacks well.
Well, Amoonguss gonna go for a Protect, just continuing to play this very defensively and very, very slow. And that is actually going to be able to eat up a bit of damage here, as we are going to see a double into the Amoonguss just coming through from the Heat Wave of Antonio's Arcanine, as Arcanine just taking a little bit of chip on Guillermo's side.
Yeah, and every bit of chip matters on this Arcanine because it can't heal, right? So as soon as you pick up the knockout onto it, it's pretty much a lost cause. So I think, Guillermo keeps going for these switches, but there's just no damage coming out at any given point. And with Arcanine being the one switch out, trying to bait an Earth Power into that slot so that you can recover it the subsequent turn. Yeah, Antonio still has Rillaboom and Corviknight in the back, which put on a lot of offensive pressure as well. But he's just not switching out right now because no need to be careless. You don't want to switch in a Corviknight into really a Spore. Although it has a Lumberry, Porygon pressures it with Thunderbolt as well. So just wait for the free switch in. And Antonio actually correctly goes for the Earth Power onto Amoonguss, so finally knocks that out. Now with Arcanine being in the back, that has no way to heal. That's going to go down to Gastrodon. And this was basically a Gastrodon 4v1 game, it felt like.
Yeah, Gastrodon's such a powerhouse in this match, and it reminds me a little bit of just like how important it is to really have like a great coverage on your team. It's so difficult though because like Gastrodon just like isn't really a Pokemon that I feel like I've seen too much of in recent weeks. So yeah, how do you really prepare for someone to bring a Gastrodon?
I think that's a brilliant point to call out because this format is so Rillaboom heavy. The majority of teams have Rillaboom. To even see a Gastrodon already is like, wow, like this was a really early metagame Pokemon. And it was so dominant here, right? I think Guillermo's team is kind of built around the fact that probably wasn't expecting to really see Gastrodon at all.
Yeah,
all right, here we go.
It's just a little bit. There's a knockout. Both. I think the Skull coming through as well. There's just going to be trade going through for both Arcanines here, and what an interesting game at the end of it all. I don't think Porygon's going to be able to get the 1v3.
Yeah, you see the timer now coming in, and Antonio actually really having that timer win condition, but at this point, at this point you can just keep damaging Porygon, especially with no Eviolite. So we'll see Antonio take this first game, but once again, Guillermo playing it out because you can get more information on speeds, how the opposing Pokemon interact with each other, and you can use this time to create a game plan going into this next match, right? Might as well just extend it a little bit further to think of what you can do going into Game 2, and I think, once again, you have to bring one of Corviknight or Tyranitar. These 4 Pokemon, like, Gastrodon 4v1s, right? We were talking about Corviknight being a Pokemon that could potentially sweep through an entire team and take these attacks. It ends up being Gastrodon in this set, so I think Guillermo definitely has to bring at least one physical attacker because the reality is that there's just not enough damage, especially, that turn 1 play with the side Will-O-Wisp, which is so smart. And I think it's tempting to just attack the Amoonguss in that slot too, so, going one step above and just saying, okay, Gastrodon really is the win condition, especially if Guillermo doesn't bring the Tyranitar or Corviknight, and with neither of them in the back, ends up being kind of a disaster for Guillermo.
Yeah, it's such a problem because I even when you take a look at Guillermo's team, what really is going to be able to deal with the Gastrodon, you kind of have to you can't really focus it down because of all of the defensive boost that it's able to get from those Max Quakes, and then you also have to really think about what are the ways to shut it down, especially now that you've seen the side Will-O-Wisp strategy come through from Antonio. You can't just Spore it, or it's a lot more difficult to Spore it.
Yeah, exactly, and you also have to be a lot more wary of just setting up Trick Room, right? I think Guillermo's Trick Room has pretty much all worked against him in this match because the Amoonguss sure was able to spore Gastrodon's partners, but none of those partners are actually really doing very much. Everything is basically, like, everything is just so bulky in this game. Like, normally what you want to do is spore and then, like, pick up a knockout on that Pokemon, but there's just so little damage coming out right now that you can't really even pull that off. So, with only 50 seconds left on timer, we're going to see this game end on timer, but I think Antonio was never really going to lose this anyway. Paralysis comes out, so, shows that the Corviknight has the Lumberry. Of course, Guillermo knows that, but confirms for the viewers that it has the common Lumberry, that most Corviknights have. And, one thing that's also valuable here is you're able to see the damage output, see how much a Scald from a Gastrodon does against Porygon without Eviolite. So, just memorize these damage calculations going into this next game. But with timer running down now on this turn, it is basically about to be over. So, oh man, I mean, that was a 20-minute game one, right? But it felt like Antonio won this on the first minute, really, especially once Guillermo revealed that he didn't have a Tyranitar or Corviknight. I just think there was almost nothing Guillermo could have done, honestly. I mean, he tried his best, and I think the one play that maybe he could have opted for was try attack onto Gastrodon the turn let the Porygon Trick Room. I think that's pretty much the only thing I can think of. If you get a critical hit there, at least you knock out the Gastrodon, or maybe a really high damage roll. I don't think he was KOing Gastrodon at that range, given that it had 3 special defense boosts, but I think that was really the only option at that point. As soon as Gastrodon gets a recover off, there's just no way to knock it out.
Yeah, it's so tough because Gastrodon, like you said, is one of those Pokemon that can really
But, Corviknights often have Lumberries, so it can eat up those burns, at least on the first turn. And if it's like a bulk up Corviknight, for example, you can just bulk up, take a lot of, get a lot of these boosts, and if Dracozolt isn't out in the game, then Corviknight, could do the same thing like Gastrodon did in that last game, maybe 4v1. So I'm looking at Corviknight and Tyranitar as the adjustments on Guillermo's end.
Well, let's get into this game too, shall we? And see whether or not those adjustments come to light. I'm super excited to see how Guillermo's going to respond to Antonio's game plan as we see Arcanine and Corviknight, the same leads of game 1 versus Corviknight and Amoonguss for Guillermo.
So there's a Corviknight adjustment. You're able to bounce back the Intimidate here. Which doesn't really provide that much value, but Corviknight at least now is able to put on a little bit of offensive pressure, especially depending on kind of the moveset. It looks like it has the bulk up set, and it's like Guillermo, debating whether to just Dynamax and go for a max Airstream, trying to get some speed boosts off, because once again, if Antonio brought the exact same 4 Pokemon as the last game, if you're able to knock out the Arcanine and it's Gastrodon and Rillaboom in the back, then, bulk up Corviknight maybe could be your late game win condition where you just get multiple bulk ups off. Once again, Amoonguss in a really tough spot because, both of these Pokemon have super effective attacks against it. It looks like Guillermo's actually going to play a little bit more defensively, which I like, recognizing, hey, if I Dynamax this Corviknight too early on and I don't get enough out of it, then once again, Antonio can just play to this win condition where he just, outbulks me in the late game. But, Porygon never really getting these special attack boosts off. It's just going to be a Heat Wave immediately, so it's a lot of damage onto Amoonguss right away.
Yeah, it really is, and it would have been even more damage if that Corviknight had stayed in this game as well. But Antonio just kind of reads that the Spore is really not going to be going in their direction, and even if it is, Antonio recognizes that the Corviknight late game is going to be very, very important. Let me just go for a bulk up now and start getting those boosts.
Yeah, with the Lumberry that we saw in the last game, very safe, opportunity to go for as well. So Corviknight now could potentially just go for, some damage, go for Brave Birds, Iron Heads. I mean, it depends on its moveset. I think in a prime position right now to start distributing damage. Arcanine here, I think, content to just stay in, stall out these couple of turns of sleep. Once again, putting a Pokemon to sleep is good, but you also have to, do enough damage to it, and that's kind of what we saw in the last game. And there was just never enough damage to happen once these Pokemon were put to sleep, especially with all the bulk from Antonio's end. So I think Corviknight in a really prime position. Last time around we saw Gastrodon come out. Corviknight's actually going to switch out here, which I'm kind of surprised about, just because it feels like it was in a really good offensive position, especially with the bulk up, but at least Rillaboom is able to take a potential Spore into that slot, and so Antonio may be recognizing, I want to conserve that Lumberry for the late game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. Just in case that the Spore does come through for Antonio, I feel like that is definitely something that Antonio just wants to kind of be cognizant of. And as we see the Trick Room come through, it's very interesting to see what Antonio's 4th Pokemon is. And if it's going to be anything like what we saw in that first game, then, Gastrodon might be in the back.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Dracozolt would be such an interesting mix-up, right? Because it actually does really well into Corviknight, so if you were expecting the Corviknight adjustment, a Dracozolt in the back would be huge. But yeah, I think Antonio there, switching to get Rillaboom in for free. This now pressures with Fake Out. It can't be put to sleep by the Amoonguss, so it makes Amoonguss relatively useless. I thought that was a great position for Corviknight just to get some damage off, but, Antonio might have also been predicting Guillermo to switch out the Amoonguss into something more offensive to pressure under Trick Room. So now Amoonguss opting for the Spore to, just eat up a potential Fake Out, and the Fake Out is going to go into that slot. So a Porygon gets a little bit of, chip damage here with a Tri-Attack. Also has potential status conditions, of course, but by targeting Arcanine, no chance of status. And Arcanine is going to take another turn of sleep.
So really interesting position for both of these players to be in, where Guillermo is just trying to kind of maneuver around some of these more offensive threats from Antonio. But now that the Rillaboom is on the field, that kind of makes things really tricky for Guillermo.
Yeah, he's got the Sludge Bomb and Tri-Attack, so you could keep dishing out damage, like do around 25-30% of damage every turn. The question is whether that's really enough, right? Because you're slowly stalling out your Trick Room turns. The Amoonguss has still taken a fair amount of damage, and as soon as Arcanine wakes up, can opt for another Heat Wave. So, Sludge Bomb able to chip away at Rillaboom a fair amount. Poison would have been big just to, keep the timer rolling on it as another Tri-Attack comes out. And this is, better damage output than we saw in the last game. But once again, Porygon loses its Eviolite, which means it's just so much less bulkier. Arcanine is able to wake up, is going to go for the Heat Wave, and it double connects. So that's a lot of damage onto the Amoonguss once again.
Oh, absolutely. The Amoonguss is still going to be able to recover just a little bit of health because of the grassy terrain that Rillaboom has set. But I feel like Amoonguss is really going to need to be able to connect some more status conditions here if Guillermo really wants to stay in this game. And I think it comes through with those spores. Yeah,
exactly. You're free to just maybe launch another Spore into the Arcanine slot. If you think Tri-Attack's going to knock out, you can just, go for an attack onto that slot. And then as you see, Amoonguss maybe thinking about potentially targeting the Rillaboom instead. So, what's tricky here is that the Arcanine has the berry. So it's like, even if you Sludge Bomb the Arcanine, it's just going to activate the berry, most likely. And then, so the big question is, can Tri-Attack pick up the knockout? It looks very, very close, honestly. So, opting not to Spore instead, because at this point, you really just need a knockout. And it's important to target the Arcanine from on Guillermo's end, because if you get rid of the Arcanine, then that is at least one of the main things that can hit the opposing Corviknight for super effective damage, especially if Gastrodon is that last Pokemon. So, I'm really curious if Antonio has the Gastrodon or the Dracozolt in the back. But Sludge Bomb, great switch in there. Corviknight is immune.
Yeah. Yes, that is going to be a really good switch in. But let's see how much this Tri-Attack does to Arcanine.
Oh!
It hangs on, but it gets frozen!
Oh, a freeze there. We'll survive. We'll eat up its berry, and we'll heal back a fair amount. Oh, but it just thaws out anyway.
Oh, wow. Oh, able to get up another Heat Wave, and it connects with both Pokemon. Amoonguss gets knocked out, and we mentioned that Guillermo is going to have to find these knockouts, but Amoonguss not really able to kind of do as much support as it kind of needed to, and we can see that Primarina is going to be the final Pokemon in the back. Is that going to be enough offensive pressure?
Yeah, what's really tricky is there's no way you can bring the Primarina out right now because you have to respect the Gastrodon, right? If you bring Primarina out right now, you can't Geyser, so you'd have to be basically fishing for a max Starfall onto a potential Gastrodon switch out, which I think is really, really tough. One turn left of Trick Room here. Porygon doesn't have its Eviolite anymore. It looks like Guillermo is finally going to push the go button and Dynamax that Corviknight, start getting some damage off, get some speed boosts as well, meaning that you can then start outspeeding everything on the opposing end. So what's interesting from Antonio's end right now is you could, maybe still Dynamax the Gastrodon in the late game, but Dynamaxing Corviknight's actually not a terrible idea here either, because maybe just is enough to do enough damage to knock out the Porygon. Even if not this turn, then certainly the next turn will be able to. Antonio's Arcanine, maybe wants to go for a Fire-type attack onto the Corviknight, just get some chip damage, or maybe Will-O-Wisp to burn the Lumberry, and then go for another Will-O-Wisp in case the Arcanine survives the turn. So, Guillermo's essentially lost the Amoonguss and didn't get very much out of it. Antonio still has one more Pokemon in the back as well. And we finally see some Dynamaxes after felt like 10 turns in this battle.
Yeah, it is going to be a Corviknight for Antonio's side, and it's going to be the battle of the birds. It's going to be super exciting to kind of see how both of these players decide to really use their Corviknights, because you have the option to go for just max Airstreams, which is just going to be able to boost the speed on both sides of the field. But I feel like critically for Guillermo, you have to get knockouts with this Corviknight.
I absolutely agree. And the question is how, really, right? Because isn't going for bulk ups right now, so you're relegated to just a couple of max airstreams. Now, max airstreams are pretty powerful, but I think this is a great protect from Antonio's end, especially because Corviknight maxed, right? So by targeting that slot, you're able to weather the storm of one turn of Dynamax on Corviknight. That's such a big deal. Thunderbolt actually does a very good amount into the opposing Corviknight, but max airstream from the opposing Corviknight just actually is able to knock out the Porygon. That's why the knockoff from Rillaboom is able to be such a critical attack there. Porygons want to normally stay on the field for a very long time, similar to what Gastrodon did in the last game and just keep healing back, but not able to do so anymore.
No, not going to be able to do that at all, as Arcanine Protecting ended up working out so well for Antonio, just being able to eat one of these turns of max from Guillermo's Corviknight. And now Guillermo's down to their last 2 Pokemon.
Yeah, the Protect is so critical there because obviously Rillaboom does not want to take a Max Airstream. And if Gastrodon's the last one, Max Airstream will do a lot to it. So it's interesting Antonio recognizing, hey, my Corviknight's actually a pretty good Pokemon to go for a Dynamax as well. We saw Antonio's Corviknight max first under Trick Room, so Guillermo's Corviknight should be faster now, so it can just opt for, a Max Stream before it attacks, a Max Airstream before it attacks. But Arcanine also getting that Max Airstream boost should be the fastest Pokemon on the field, so because you're probably expecting Arcanine to go down here, could go for some disruption onto the Primarina, for example, a Snarl, decrease that special attack, which makes it all the more tougher for Guillermo to win. Antonio could also switch into the Gastrodon if you're expecting, the water-type attacks to come out right now, that Hydro Pump into Corviknight. But I think if Arcanine even gets a single Snarl off here before it faints, that would be really, really critical because then Primarina's damage output is just significantly reduced. And so I think what Antonio wants to do right now is basically knock out the Primarina and then force a 2v1 position against the opposing Corviknight. It looks like Snarl is going to go first, is going to connect on the Primarina. Doesn't really care about being bounced back here. More importantly, now Primarina is doing so much less damage.
Absolutely. Primarina is the big target for that Snarl as Arcanine takes another Max Airstream. This time does get knocked out to it because it went for the Snarl instead of the Protect. But now that even though that Guillermo has this speed boost, Primarina did take that Snarl, so it's at -1 special attack. Oh, and it takes so much damage from the Max Airstream, too.
Yeah, that's obviously a 2-hit KO there. That's just such a big chunk. There's the Hydro Pump. No, does a lot, but, no critical hit. Primarina takes more damage from the Life Orb as well, so it's basically on a timer. That will faint relatively soon. So, this game definitely a lot closer than that first one, where it felt like, Antonio pretty much locked up that first game very early on. This time around, Guillermo has Corviknight as a late-game win condition because, Antonio doesn't have that many great super effective attacks into the Corviknight. So Guillermo also having that faster Corviknight able to attack first, I think, is really critical. So last turn now, and the thing is that the Primarina is in immediate danger of getting knocked out, right? So because it's slower as well, I think right now Corviknight on Antonio's end content to just launch a Max Airstream into the Primarina. Gastrodon might be scared of a Max Airstream going into that slot, so it might choose to protect here. Otherwise, you could also just go for maybe a Scald onto the Corviknight, start fishing for those burns, get rid of the Lumberry so that you can go for further Scalds, because a burnt Corviknight will have a lot tougher time winning this game.
For sure. As we do see the Max Airstream comes through into Antonio's Corviknight, but look at how little damage that does. So Antonio's Corviknight going to be able to fire off yet another attack here, as we do see that the Protect comes through from the Primarina, but there was no Protect from the Gastrodon. So Primarina able to get a little bit of damage through the Protect, but let's see what this Gastrodon does.
Yeah, presumably it would be a Scald into Corviknight. I think just start getting some damage off into it. Yeah, looks like it is Scald. And, if you get a burn at any point, you get rid of that Lumberry. And Scalds actually do a fair amount too, right? Corviknight's special defense isn't really that incredible. So I think because of that Protect last turn, Antonio's in a really good spot. What you have to do now is just knock out Primarina. You're going to outspeed with the Corviknight, so Guillermo maybe recognizes that. Looks like he is going for the Iron Head, trying to flinch the Corviknight. So if Corviknight flinches here, maybe there's a shot. If you get the flinch onto that, the Corviknight can knock out the Primarina. So, let's see.
Oh, Iron Head comes through. Well, it's
is
not
there a
super
flinch?
effective,
Oh,
it is a flinch! Oh my goodness.
And the special attack drop onto the Gastrodon.
Wow,
Can the Primarina hang on? It has 1 HP as well!
Oh my
goodness.
What is this turn?
I think Antonio there maybe could have considered doubling up into the Primarina just to cover for the flinch option, because now what's actually really tricky is your Gastrodon's at -1 special attack. You don't want to switch out the Corviknight, so you'll probably just let Guillermo knock you out. because you can just go for a Brave Bird into the opposing Corviknight that covers Rillaboom as well. So I mean, if Primarina gets like a high damage roll into the Gastrodon or crits it with the Moonblast, that might just be the game for Guillermo. So critical flinch last turn. Let's see, is Moonblast able to do enough? That last one did just under 50%. Oh, it's so close!
It's on! Primarina gets knocked out to the recoil damage from the Life Orb, and critically Gastrodon gets a chance to consume its berry, which will keep it just a little bit safer. Scald comes through. Corviknight takes so much damage from the crit. Holy cow.
Oh, and that's actually going to seal up the game. I was thinking maybe Corviknight could pull off the 2v1 against Rillaboom and Gastrodon. It would still be tough, right? Because even if you don't get the crit there, then you can fake out Scald the next turn, and then Rillaboom can knock off. So then the question is whether Gastrodon actually activates that Lumberry on Corviknight at any given point, because if so, knockoff does less damage. But with that critical hit, that game will be sealed up. I mean, Guillermo needed a lot to go right in his favor, mainly that flinch onto the opposing Corviknight. One way Antonio could have mitigated that was doubling up into the Primarina slot. He was probably thinking the Life Orb damage would pick up the knockout anyway, but oh man, that endgame ended up being so close. I mean, we saw a flinch, we saw a special attack drop, we saw Primarina hang out with 1 HP, and then we saw a critical hit, all of that within the span of 2 turns.
I feel like you and I have had a lot of